Welcome, dear friends, for the fourth week of Lent to our two reflections. Alessandra's behind the camera again, and we're here in St. Clement's little patio garden, which is across the way from Redemptorist publications. Last week we were on the mountain. We were discussing disfiguration and transfiguration. This week it's celebrating the ministry of Jesus along the road. In terms of the movement of the gospel story, dear friends, the Jesus story could be filmed as a road movie. The road to Jerusalem dominates the whole of Jesus' story, and you watch him leave the highlands of Galilee, travel down through Samaria, and then up to the city of Jerusalem, the place where the country prophet will come to a violent end. Jesus leaves home and returns only once, as far as we know, to experience rejection and hostility from his own townspeople and his relatives. When he escapes from home, he never returns. He takes to the road as an independent, wandering teacher and healer, and he remains on the road for the remainder of his ministry. Jesus leaves all behind him: home, family, neighbours, work, and he takes to the road. He says goodbye to everything familiar to him, leaving it all over his shoulder. It's a huge transition, this, to move from the settled life of a small village in Nazareth to become a pioneer, not only in taking new roads and gathering new friends and devising new means of reaching out to people, but also in attracting a formidable array of new enemies. The transition from the quiet, settled life of Nazareth, of a village carpenter, to become a wandering preacher, going from town to village to town to village, is a particular challenging one. You have to say goodbye to the place where you were secure and feel at home. You have to face a larger world of insecurity and strangeness. The famous lines of Robert Frost from The Road Not Taken are appropriate. I shall be telling you this with a sigh, somewhere ages and ages hence. Two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less travelled by, and that has made all the difference. In the gospel story, the evangelists present Jesus as a man who commands enormous authority and loyalty and respect and devotion. He has the capacity to attract disciples to leave their homes and jobs and families and to follow him on the road. Clearly, he makes an impact on people. And because of that very positive impression, people become interested in who he is and in his mission. Dear friends, the impact happens first. The interest comes second. If there's no impact, there's no interest. We don't become interested in people who make absolutely no impact on us. If Jesus had done and said the same things as all the other rabbis, nobody would have been moved to ask the question, but who is this man? That question presupposes that Jesus makes a significant impact on people, provoking people to wonder about his identity. Because of Jesus' verbs, because of what he actually makes happen, people begin to wonder who the subject of the verb is. Impact leads to wonder. So you have the questions, who is this man who even forgives sins? Who is this man who commands the waves to be still? Who is this man who opens the eyes of the blind? Dear friends, none of Jesus' disciples would have followed him if they had not been first attracted by his person and his message. You don't give up everything to follow someone who looks primed for failure, someone who looks like he's heading nowhere. On what basis would you leave everything to follow someone? Who would that person have to be? And what would they have to do and be to attract you away from your own settled life? Whatever disposition his followers have, Jesus needs their help, doesn't he? He's not a perfectionist, aggressively demanding that his disciples measure up to all his ideals before he risks them on their own mission. After all, Jesus only has one voice. He's got one pair of hands and feet. He needs his disciples if his message is to spread further than Galilee. One of Jesus' great attributes, it seems to me, is that he trusts his disciples in all their fragility. He says, you go on your way. A command that seems either incredibly hopeful or utterly foolhardy. If some of us were training the disciples, I fear they would probably be still in formation, awaiting our critical approval. After so short a training, Jesus risks them on their own. He wants them to find their own voice. He wants them to find their own roads in life, hoping that in spite of their vulnerability, their love and commitment might be caught by others who meet him. He hopes that their love for one another, not their efficiency, might be catching. It might intrigue people into joining their project. Compared to the strength of his opponents, Jesus is aware that his own disciples, frankly, are like lambs among wolves. In other words, they must be prepared to be eaten alive. Such is the urgency of the preaching the kingdom that Jesus takes this epic risk. After all, dear friends, time is not on his side. In other words, the disciples are not just to follow Jesus, but they have to make their own roads in life. The disciple is challenged to become like the Master, to share in his power. The Master will not be around forever. The disciple will have to take over and become a leader and attract other people to the movement. Disciples must not only follow, but in the end they have to become leaders themselves in their own turn. They must grow into their own authority, one that reflects the gentleness and love of Jesus himself. There's a wonderful story, I think it comes from India, about discipleship, where this poor man is sleeping one night and the Lord Shiva appears to him in a dream and he says, when you get up in the morning, I want you to go to the height on the southwest corner of the mountain range, and there you will find a guru. Ask the guru to give you the diamond. So up he gets in the morning and travels, and he finds the guru who's sitting on the summit holding a huge diamond. He says, the Lord Shiva has asked me to come to you and ask you to give me the diamond. The guru looked at him, and he looked at the diamond, and he said, here it is. He couldn't believe his ears. This was the largest diamond in the world. And when he went back to his hut, he put it under the bed. But even at night, the diamond seemed to shine in the dark. He was an intelligent young man, and he thought, and he said, I'm going to go back to the guru. Next morning, he took back the diamond to the guru. He gave it back to the guru. And he said, Guru, I would like you to teach me one thing: how to give away diamonds. The poor man becomes a disciple because he wants to become like the Master. He wants to share in the power of the Master, not just received handouts from the Master, however lavish they are. And the big question is, will the Master share his power with the disciple, or will he forever keep the disciple like a slave? Jesus, remember, tells his own disciples, I do not call you servants anymore, because a servant does not know what the Master is doing. I call you friends, because I have let you know everything I have learnt from my Father. Jesus passes on everything to his disciples so that they may find their own road in life, that they might come into their own authority, that people will look to them eventually as leaders. Dear friends, what roads have you chosen in life that have determined who you are today? What roads have you taken that have made all the difference? When you look back over the roads that you've taken in your life and the people you have known, does your gratitude outweigh your regrets? Are you more thankful because of the roads you have taken and the people that you have met? Dear friends, you might want to pause and take a wee break there before we go on to the second part of our reflection. In this part, dear friends, we're going to follow the great example of John Shea, whom I have a great respect for, when he invites us to go back to the familiar stories of Jesus, rethink them, reimagine them, and then risk retelling them in the hope that something fresh might touch our listeners. Who knows? The stories have their own integrity. They're there in the Gospels. So I would like to retell a couple of the stories of Jesus, because Jesus did most of his great teaching on the road, you notice. Not in the synagogue, not in the temple, but walking along the road, stopping sometimes, listening to people, talking to people. even at night sometimes. I mean, I wasn't there, but some people would like to meet him at night. Some people who were cautious or a bit afraid, who didn't want any witnesses, and they would come to whisper to him in the dark, sitting by the fire at night time. Many people would come, and he would be sitting by the fire with a circle of light beating back the Galilean darkness. I wasn't there. But they say once upon a time there was a young man who came out of the shadows, and people could see as he approached Jesus. He was dressed in linen and fine purple. His large gold ring glinted in the firelight, and people who saw him knew he had inherited more than the wind, this man. He sat beside Jesus and he said, "Shalom, Rabbi." Jesus said, "Shalom, my friend. What can I do for you?" He said, "My father is dead." Jesus says, "Oh, let's pray together for your father." He said, No, I haven't come here, Master, for your prayers, to be honest." He said, "Everyone knows, and all the rabbis teach, that when the father is dead, the inheritance is divided among the sons. And my elder brother refuses to divide the inheritance. So what I've come to ask you, Master, is can you as a rabbi direct him to divide the inheritance between the two of us?" "Master," he said, "I am not asking for what is not mine. All I'm doing is asking for what is rightfully mine." Jesus looked at him and he said, "Do you think the purpose of my coming here is to divide brother from brother?" And then he said nothing. And all the people could hear was the wood crackling in the fire and the moan of the wind through the trees. They waited. And when Jesus spoke, there was a story on his lips. He said, once upon a time there was a rich farmer. Oh, he was nothing like you. His hair was in retreat. He was round and fat like a banquet calf, not like you, still in the vigour of youth. He was nothing like you at all. One evening he was sitting with his family and friends at dinner, and his steward came and interrupted them and said, Master, come, I need to speak to you." So he went to speak to the steward, and the steward said, "Master, I've just been out in the field. It's extraordinary. You know the fields I bought from that peasant farmer who was stupid? Well, they are now alive with wheat. There's superabundance, there's surplus everywhere." He says, "Give me your torch." And he took the torch, and the torch beat back the darkness, and he could see for himself. There was superabundance absolutely everywhere. The servant says, Master, the finger of God has touched you." The farmer said, "How do I keep all this wheat that is mine from all those who are not me?" That's the question. He said, "We'll have to build huge barns." The servant said, "Absolutely, Master. We'll have to build barns as big as basilicas to keep all this wheat that is yours. These will be great houses of bread. Oh, the finger of God has surely touched you." The farmer said nothing. He went back home, and by the time he got home, all his family and friends had left. His family were upstairs asleep, and he went upstairs on his large staircase into his large bedroom, and his large, beautiful wife was fast asleep. So he got in beside her, thinking to himself, having only himself to think to, how do I keep all this wheat that is mine from all those who are not me? The next weeks saw him very, very busy. He brought in builders from another country to build the biggest barns the country had ever seen, to keep all this wheat that was his inside. When the barns were built, he called locksmiths from a very far country to come and make locks for the barns. And when they saw all the wheat, they said, Master, gosh, the finger of God has touched you, Master. He said, will the locks fit? They said, Master, there's only one key, and you will have the key. When the wheat was pressed tight into the big barns, the farmer dismissed all the servants and sent them home. There was no celebration. And that night he locked the great barns and he hid the key somewhere nobody would ever dream of looking. And by the time he went home, his family had gone to bed. When he went upstairs into his large bedroom, and on his large bed, his large, beautiful wife was fast asleep, wrestling with her dreams. And he got in beside her, and he thought to himself, I will never be hungry again. I have all this wheat that is truly, rightfully mine, and it's all safe. I will never be hungry again. And Jesus turned to the rich young man, who was nothing like this rich farmer. And he said, you know, he never was hungry again. That night he died in bed. Tell me this, he said, whose will the inheritance be now that he's dead? If you take away from that man everything he has, who is he? The rich young man blurted out, then you won't tell my brother, will you? And Jesus said, no. Sometimes you have to say no because of what you believe in, because you have to say yes to your own beliefs. Sometimes you have to say no. And the rich young man got up and he pushed his way through the crowd. And Jesus' eyes never left him as he moved farther and farther away until he disappeared into the night. We would like to know more, but more is not ours to know, really. Except that sometimes after Jesus had come down the mountain and joined his disciples, and the mountain had whispered to him secrets that no one had ever heard, and Jesus would say to the disciples, was there any word? And they would say, word about what? He said, remember that young rich man who only wanted in life what was rightfully his? Did he ever come back? Have you seen him? And Peter got very upset about this. Peter said, look, Master, this rich young man is like all the rich. If they can't get what they want, they just disappear in a cloud of dust. He said, look at us. We'll never leave you. We'll never run away. Why are you bothered about him? He's gone. Peter said, look, Master, can I quote a sermon you gave the other day? You said preaching was like being a mad farmer who goes out and he throws seed everywhere. Even among rocks, he throws the seed, in the hope that somewhere this seed will land and grow. But he said, Master, you said some people are like rock. You can throw the seed at them from breakfast to supper and nothing will ever take. You said that yourself, Master. Some people are like rock. Jesus said, you're still asking me why I bother. He said to Peter, sit down, Rocky, and I'll tell you why I bother. He said, once upon a time there was a father who had 2 sons, and he lost both of them. One he lost in a far country, the other he lost in his own house. Peter said, Master, sorry for interrupting. He said, how can you get lost in your own house? Jesus says, Peter, you don't have to go anywhere to get lost. You can be lost in the middle of your own community. You can be lost in the middle of your own house. You can be lost in the middle of yourself. Listen and I'll tell you. Sorry, Master. Peter said, go ahead. Jesus said he loved both of them, his 2 sons. And he loved watching them work in the fields. The younger son was always stripped to the waist, looking very energetic, looking like he was going to do a long day's work. And he would go up and down the field far too quickly. You could feed a village on the wheat that he left behind him. And then he would go to his father and he'd say, Abba, 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 Abba. He said, could I go home now and practice the guitar so that tonight I will sing a new song for you? How about that, Abba? And the old man loved his son. He said, oh, okay, son, you go home and you compose a new song for us tonight. That will be good. The elder son was quite different. He was always properly dressed. And he walked up and down the field like he was looking for a lost treasure. He lost nothing. He missed nothing. He was a perfectionist. And then he would go to his father and he would say, where's he gone? And the father said, oh, you mean your brother? He's gone back and he's going to compose some lovely music for supper tonight. Isn't that good? Oh, he said, you know, when there's real work to be done in this place, he always disappears in a cloud of dust with his guitar. He said, I suppose I'd better go over what he's missed and do it properly. The father said, you're very kind. Thank you, son. I would be really grateful for that. One morning, just after breakfast, the younger son said, Abba, how's your health? You're in good health, aren't you, Abba? Long may your good health last, Abba. The old man said, oh, I'm not. My legs, I have to tell them to hurry up and come after me. They're a bit stiff. And my eyes are weakening every other day now. He said, but I still feel quite good. Long may your good health last. And he says, Abba, I think it's going to last a long time. I think it's going to last a long time. So, you know, the tradition is that when you die, all the land will be divided between me and my brother. The old man says, son, you don't have to worry about that yet. I'm in good health and that'll take a while. He said, Abba, I know it's going to take a while. He says, Abba, I don't want to spend my life following 2 oxen up and down and up and down and up and down a field. He said, Abba, there's a big world out there with people of different colours and different cultures and different languages, and I would love to taste some of that first and then come back home, and then I would very happily look after you for the remains of the day. Do you think I could have my inheritance now, do you think? I mean, I'm not asking for what is not mine. I'm only asking for what is rightfully mine. But I would love to have it now. The old man said nothing. He went into some secret sanctuary inside himself. And when he came back out again, he said, "If I do this, will you be happy, son?" "Oh," he said, "I will be the happiest man in all of Israel." He said, "Call your elder brother." And that afternoon they walked all around the property of the father. And at the end, he divided the property between both of them. He said, "All I have is yours. You two are the only thing I have left. You two are my inheritance. God be with you." The next morning, the younger son was unusually busy. He was making big signs with 2 words on them, "For sale." And he put all these signs around his property with a date for the auction. The land was rich, and the auction came soon. And the old father, who had spent years tilling these fields, watched the fields disappear at the drop of a hammer, but he kept saying to himself, "My inheritance is my true son's. Surely that's it." When the auction money came to the younger son, he went to see his father. He said, "Father, I'll be off just for a little while to see the great, beautiful world that's waiting for me." And the old man said, "Well, you will come back, son, won't you?" And he embraced his son and he started to cry down the nape of his neck. The elder brother was watching and he said, "If I were going, there would be no tears for me." The younger son left home. Everything was over his shoulder. The open road was ahead of him. And he knew where he was going, but he didn't tell anyone. A few months before, he had met 2 beautiful young women in the marketplace. He'd never seen beauty like this before. And he went to them and asked them very politely. He said, "So where are you from? Which country are you from?" They said, "We are from the great land of Ethiopia." "Oh," he said, it was their eyes. Their large eyes, deep and watery, like swimming pools. And he wanted to learn to swim in Ethiopia. And when he got there, he left his cloak in many a house, but it was not to escape Potiphar's wife. Many women let their hair down for him, but it was not to wash his feet. A great famine came over the land of Ethiopia. And he ran into a famine, and he ran out of money. He was desperate. And suddenly he just became another refugee, another migrant worker, another man in the wrong place at the wrong time. He was desperate for work. He was so desperate for work, he ended up tending pigs. And as he sat in the pig pen, he said to himself, "What on God's earth am I doing here? In my Father's house there's plenty food, plenty drink, plenty love." So his stomach made a decision to go home. And on his way home, he tried to rehearse a boring speech, as if his father's welcome would depend on his words. And all the time he was away, his father missed him terribly. There was no music in the house. There was no laughter. There was only talk about work, and more work. And the old man had never given up the habit of hoping. He would bake a fresh loaf every morning, and he would put it on the place of his younger son, and he would say, we will eat that loaf only when he comes back. And when he didn't come back that day, he would break up the loaf and give it to the birds of the air. But next morning, he would bake a fresh loaf. And one morning, as usual, he went up the hill, but this morning he saw a kind of a figure break over the horizon. He didn't know who it was, but his heart told him it was his son. So lifting his robes, he ran to meet this broken figure. The servants saw their master running. They thought the house must be on fire. But then they saw he was running towards somebody, not away, somebody that looked like a prisoner with his scruffy clothes and his broken sandals and his mangled hair. Before the younger son knew it, his father was embracing him and saying, welcome home, son. He said, Father, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I'm not worthy to be called your son. He said, look, you are my son for God's sake. And you're home. You're home. Isn't that wonderful? The father wasn't interested in listening to boring speeches. He took him by the hand, and side by side, stride by stride, they made it home together, where a party was organized. And the party had no choice but to begin with all the villagers attending. Everybody was at the party except one. The elder brother always worked longer and harder than anyone else. He would come home well after the cows had come home. And when he approached his house, and it was his house, he heard two strange sounds. He heard music and dancing, and then he heard the sound of a guitar. He called a servant. He said, what the hell is going on in my house? The servant said, your brother has come back and your father he's killed the fatted calf. He said that the party is getting underway. He said they've even got holy water from Scotland. He said it tastes like fire. Hurry up and come in before the fire goes out. The elder brother said, you go and tell my father I will not eat with that one. The servant said, please yourself. So he went in to the house. And the younger son was singing a new song in Amharic. I will sing a new song to you, Abba. The servant waited until the song was finished, and then he whispered to the old man. He said, your other son is outside and he refuses to come in. For a second time that day, the old man lifted his robes, and for a second time that day, he ran towards the son in the hope that he could take him home. But as he ran towards him, he heard a shout that almost drove him back. All these years I have slaved for you. All these years I have slaved for you. The old man looked into the eyes of his elder son, and he saw an angry slave looking back at him. And he took his sleeve and he tried to wipe the sweat of the slave from the forehead of his son. He said, your son is back. Surely this feast will find him. He was dead, and now he's alive to us. The elder son said, that man has brought shame on our family. I'm sure everyone is laughing at us, leaving this house robed with money and then coming back looking like a convict. He shamed our family. The father said, son, why are you always so angry? Why do you look on life with such disappointment? He said, you've never given a party to me and all my friends. The father said, son, all I have is yours. You don't need my permission to smile. You don't need my permission to dance. You don't need my permission to invite all your friends to your house for a party. The older son says, what price is loyalty here? I work here day in, day out, week in, week out, month in, month out. What reward do I get? He said, son, all I have is yours. And then he thought of a line of poetry that was not yet written. Too long a sacrifice can make a stone of the heart. He turned away from his elder son. He says, I am not going to let his anger write my script. I'm not going to be manipulated away from love. So he went back down the hill to the house. And when he got there, everybody had come out of the house, including the younger son. The great cloak that his father put on him had slipped off his starving shoulders. The ring was too big for his fingers. The sandals started to bite into his ankles. The father looked at both of them. His true inheritance. There was silence. And then he said, I am going to dance to the music that is within me. And he lifted his robes and he started to dance, hoping that they, his two sons, his true inheritance, would hear the same music and come together. Jesus turned to his disciples, and especially to Peter, and he said, well, why bother? Why bother? Peter said, Master, I think I've got this one. I really think I've got this one. He said, there's a father in each of us who knows when to run with mercy and embrace in kindness. There's a younger son in each of us who wants to throw away everything we've been given, who will always be in need of forgiveness and kindness. And there's the elder son in each of us who wants to make everyone else pay for our perfect performance. Peter said the question is, which of these will speak in us? Jesus says, Peter, even I didn't think of that. He said, Peter, you're very clever. He said, Peter, you're the light of the world, you know. Peter said, Master, could you speak up a bit so the others can hear you? Just say it once more. And Jesus looked at each of his disciples without missing any of them. And he said, you are the light of the world. You will do greater things than I will. And they all hoped that one day they could become Jesus' dream of them. One day, I don't know. I wasn't there. Jesus had so many experiences on the road. He met so many people. And they turned their experience into a story and they offered it to other people as good news. Stories like this are told about him. And the purpose of the telling is always the same, that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, And believing this, you may have life in his name. Let us pray. We pray for all who have had to quit home because they were excluded or rejected. For all who leave home as economic migrants, unable to make a living where they first belonged, that the Lord will guide their steps to new pastures, to a place they can call home. We pray for all who are fleeing from danger, for all who are homeless and hungry. We pray for them and for all who work to bring them relief, that the Lord in his kindness might watch over refugees and exiles, those separated from their loved ones, young people who are lost, and those who have left or run away from home too. We pray that they will arrive at their destination safely. We ask the Lord to bless us and never withhold his loving hands from us. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.